Welcome back to another Word VBA tutorial. So in today's video, we are going to cover the find object. So for those of you who might not be familiar with exactly what object this is representing in the VBA object model, let me take a little bit of your time and explain. So normally, if you select a range of content, if you do Control F, if you're on Windows, you can do a find, right? And so the idea is that you can go here and you can take something like, I don't know, Amazon, right? And it will find all the instances of Amazon in this particular content, right? And then there's also more advanced type of finding. So if you actually go to advanced, you can go to more, and there's basically like all these different types of searches you can do. So some where you're specifying like, oh, it's got to match a certain casing, so like certain letter casing. You can use wildcards and a whole bunch of other stuff. So the idea behind this is that we can actually manipulate this functionality from Word VBA. And so that's what we're going to do today. I have three examples. One is a simple one, one is a more complicated one, and then finally we're going to go into definitely a more complex one. All right, so first things first is you want to make sure you're in your Visual Basic editor. You want to make sure you create a new module if you have not done so. So right click, insert, and go to module. Once you've done that, we can create a new subroutine. You can give whatever name you want, but in this case, I'm going to say using the find object simple, because this is our simple example. Anytime we create a new VBA script, we should declare our variables right from the get-go. Declare our variables. And the first one that we're going to be declaring is called word find. And you guessed it, it's a find object. Next, there is going to be a word range, and this is going to be a range object. So a range is very different compared to Excel. In this case, a range can actually be a range of like content almost, right? So a range in Word is basically like a range of content. Additionally, we're going to be working with a document. So we'll declare a document variable. Next, we're going to grab the active document. And so we're going to say set our Word doc equal to application active document. So the active document property returns a document object. So this is the one that we're currently in. Additionally, I want to define the content in this document. And so we're going to say set word range equal to word doc and content. So if you do content, it's basically saying everything in my document. So what you're saying is your range at this point is everything. Okay, so now that we've defined a range, we can actually now define our find object, because if we want to use a find object, it's related to a range object. So define the find object based on the range. It's very important to keep in mind it is based off of a range. You will understand that very soon as we go a little bit more in depth. So you take your range object and you call the find property. This returns the find object. We've set it to our word find object variable. And now using a with statement, we can define certain criteria of our search. So we're going to define the parameters of our search. Okay, so we're going to say with word find and with. I'm going to scroll this down a little bit. Okay. And with this one, let's start it simple and let's just work for the phrase Jeff Bezos. So look for the phrase Jeff Bezos. Okay, and so to do that, we define the text property of our find object, and then we pass through a string which represents the text we are looking for. Now, Mr. Bezos has lots of money. If you have not been keeping up lately, Amazon stock is doing very well. Okay, so now that we've done that, we're going to conduct a search based on the phrase Jeff Bezos. And so what we can do is we can create a new variable called search result, and that will equal the result of calling the execute method. when you call the execute method, it returns a Boolean value, so a true or false value. True if that content was found. If it was not found, then it returns false. Now, this will only return the first match. So what we're going to do from here is once we've defined our search result, I'll show you how to get all of them. So conduct the search. If a match, it returns true, else false. Very simple. Okay, perfect. So if we found it, what we're going to do is we're going to display it in our immediate window. So the one right here. So if we found it, display it. Perfect. So if search result equals true, then end. Okay, and then we're going to display our message, and we're going to say display message. So we're going to do debug print, and then we're going to do found the word Jeff Bezos now formatting. So that's actually also a cool thing about this, right? So now that we found that word, we actually have a reference to it. So this is kind of the interesting thing about the find object. Every time you find something, what will happen is it will actually change the reference of the range. So we are no longer working with the entire content. We are now working with the result of our search. So this will return the first search. And what we're going to do is we're just going to keep it really simple, and we're just going to change the font to bold. And so we're going to say, where is it? Word range bold equals true. So again, a little bit interesting, but the idea is it's kind of, different, where normally we're used to like, okay, the range stays relatively constant. Not in this case. It's actually changing a little bit. So let's see what we get. And you can see it highlighted, well, a little bit hard to tell, but it found it and then it formatted it. So this was a very simple example. We only found the first occurrence of that word. What we're going to do next is we're now going to go into like a more advanced example, do some more formatting. And then what we're going to do is we're going to actually, I think in the second one, if I remember correctly, we're going to find every instance. Yes. So to keep things just a little bit, concise, I'm going to copy pretty much everything I have here, and we're just going to add the parts that we need to add. Okay. So we're going to say sub using the find object, and I call this our medium example. Perfect. So everything at this point is staying the same. A couple things I'm going to do is I'm going to change the search content. So in this case, I'm going to say, look for the text Amazon. Okay. And so here I'm just going to say, okay, Amazon, and that's great. Okay. And now we're going to define a couple more criteria, right? So the first one is we're going to say match case. And so if this one's true, basically what we're saying is we do not want lowercase or all uppercase. Whatever you see here, you need to follow that casing. So must match casing. Now, the nice thing about the whole find object is it's pretty straightforward about what you can do and what you can't do with matching. Match byte, match case, match fuzzy, match phrase. So you get a lot of control as to how you want to match. You just kind of have to determine, what exactly you're trying to do. And so in this case, I'm just putting another property, not wildcards, whole word. And so this one's saying, hey, it's got to match the whole word. And then, so must match whole word. And then additionally, there's this other one called formatting. So any formatting rules that I define, it has to match that criteria as well. So for example, if I did font has to be bold, for example, I could do that. And if that's true, then basically what I'm saying is like any formatting criteria that I specify have to be met. Now in this case, unfortunately, I really can't do that because I haven't done any crazy formatting. But if you wanted to and say must match any formatting rules, defined in the search. That's just a little trick in case you want it. Now, some of the code I post on GitHub, I'll put some examples up there that are a little bit more different. Okay. Now, in this case, I want to find every instance. In this case, find every instance. So what we're going to do is we're going to say do while. Oh, geez, no. And then we're going to do word find execute equals true. And then we're going to say loop. So here's the kind of the interesting part, right? We remember, hopefully we remember that with this, the execute method will return true as long as there's a match. So if we keep calling execute, it's just going to simply go to the next match. Eventually, it's going to run out of matches because it's going to reach the end of our document. So when it reaches the end of our document, it's going to return false. When it returns false, it's going to exit this loop. So that's kind of the idea behind it. So all we're going to do is we're going to display a message that says found the word Amazon, now formatting. So we're going to change it to bold. We're going to change the color to blue. And we're going to say word range font dot color index equals word blue. Additionally, we're going to do just some crazy formatting, nothing that I would make sense, but we could also work with the parent paragraph. And so what that would look like is if I took my word range object and I go to the paragraphs collection, and then I specify the alignment property, then what will happen is I can actually change the alignment of the paragraph that this range is part of. So pretty cool, I think, because technically all you have to know is that range. If you call that paragraphs, it's going to return all the paragraphs in that range. Well, more than likely, it's probably just going to be one. So then it does it. So if I run this right now, let's see what we get. Okay, so that's kind of cool. But you know what? I want it to be even a little bit more smart. So for example, what happens if it's a hyperlink? I want it to format it if it's a hyperlink too. So what we can do is we can say if our word range hyperlinks.count is greater than 0, then, and if, with this situation, I want to change the color to green. So I'm going to say change the font to green. So we're going to say word range font color equals, and then I want bright green, something really in there. So if it's a hyperlink, format differently. So that's kind of neat, right? So now we can use some of our previous knowledge and apply it to our search. Okay, so now our hyperlink is colored differently compared to the rest of the Amazon one. But you know what? I think we can do even a little bit more fancy. What happens if it's part of a bullet list, right? Well, we can also specify that, right? So again, because we're working with a word range object, we can work with any of the objects or properties that belong to it. So for example, list format has a property called list type. And if that list type is equal to word list bullet, then we want to do something differently with that one. In this case, what we're going to do is change the font to red. Oh. I don't get that excited over red, but. And then we're going to do word color. No. Red. There's a rose. Interesting. We're going to have to see if it's part of a bullet list, format differently. Perfect. So ideally, I'm looking for this one over here to change. Okay, so that one changed. So now it's rows. But yeah, so this is definitely what I would call is probably a medium example. You got multiple criteria that you're searching off of. And when you do find your search, you want to format them differently based on what type of object you're working with. So now we're going to go to the more complicated one. The complicated one really at the end of the day isn't crazy complicated, but it's misleading. You think it's going to work a certain way and it doesn't work a certain way. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new subroutine, and we'll call this one our complex one. And we're going to define a couple more variables. So we're going to define some arrays to store our info. And so we're going to say dim word search list as variant. And then we're going to dim word search format as variant. So variant basically is just, we're saying it can be anything. Additionally, this is going to stay the same. This is actually going to change a little bit, but we'll get to that in a second. First thing is we're going to create an array of strings that we will search for. So in this case, this one's a little bit different because my goal is to do multiple searches in the same document. But what we're going to do is we're going to create an array that looks for very specific characters, right? So the first one is I want to say anything where the last character is a percentage sign. And then I want any word where the first character is a $sign. So these are more of the numeric figures, right? So things like 86.02 billion and so on and so on and so on, right? So once we've done that, we've defined our search list. Now we need to define our search format. So define the format roles. And again, because we're using an array, it's probably best to just kind of keep it like that. We could also, if we wanted to, do a multi-dimensional array if you really felt compelled to. So word color orange, and then I'm gonna do word color, I want something different today. Initially it was gonna be bright green, but I already did that. There's yellow, there's blue, turquoise, lime, olive green, sea green. That sounds kind of cool. We'll do sea green. Okay, so now from here, we're gonna go and we're gonna actually start looping. So at this point, this is where you wanna start looping. So step one, start looping. Okay, so we're gonna say for I equals lower bound, so the bottom of my array, word search list, to the upper bound of my word search list. This is a nice way to loop through the entire array. And so what we're gonna do is we're gonna say next. Now I am gonna just text some stuff just to make sure I'm not, okay, perfect. Okay, so you might be asking, why am I doing it like this? When we loop, we have to start at the beginning of our document, right? There's different ways to do this. Personally, I found this just to be the easiest. There's probably different ways, so this is by no means the only way. But what I'm saying is every time I'm searching for a word, I want to start with my range representing the entire document content. So that's rule number one. It's always got to start where the range represents the entire document content. Then I want to define my find. So my find is based off of the word document content. And then in this case, what I'm going to be doing is I'm just going to be kind of modifying my existing search, right? So in this case, I'm going to say, I want to do word search list, and then I want it to be whatever I'm on in my loop. Right? So if I'm on the first character, then I want it to be that one. So look for the text. And then in this case, what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to delete some of this stuff. And I'm going to say match wildcards, because in this case, I'm using a wildcard in order to determine which one I want to specify. So I've got wildcards, I've got my search list. I'm doing that within my with statement. I'm still going to look for every single instance. So this one is still going to stay the same. But I also want to make my printing message a little bit more dynamic. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to concatenate on my word search list item whenever I'm on at this point. And so once I've done that, it will now dynamically change based on whatever I am on in the loop. I'll still keep it blue. And then I'm actually going to get rid of some of this stuff because now it's just kind of a little bit unnecessary. But I do want to change my color. And so in this case, I want my color to be whatever I'm on in my word search format. But you also got to keep in mind, I wrote this a very specific way. They're lined up. So each array has the same number of elements, and I'm very specific. I want this one to be applied with that format. If you start rearranging the order, then this logic will not hold. So I wrote it a very specific way, and the reason why is so now I can kind of have each format line up exactly with the word that I'm looking for. So change the color to match whatever we are on in the loop. Perfect. Okay, so let's see this more complicated example and see what happens. It's kind of a little bit hard to see, but I'll kind of zoom in for you. But you can see it actually highlighted every character that it needed to. So I thought this was pretty cool. Definitely shows the power of VBA, I think, especially with Word. But with just a little bit of code, you can all of a sudden do these really complicated searches. And if you, especially if you know wildcard rules, you can start doing some pretty advanced stuff, and you can start finding some words that might be a little bit challenging. So I would actually encourage you, if any topic you start looking a little bit more in depth to, I think this would definitely be one that you would find a little bit interesting. I found it interesting, but I find a lot of things interesting, so I'm not the person to ask. Okay, I think at this point, I think we have enough covered. If you have any questions, feel free to put them down in the comments below, and I'll do my best to get back to you. Trying to think what's next. So at least for VBA, the next one is going to be connection objects, and then we're going to talk about query tables. And so again, this is kind of more related to some stuff I'm doing at work, but I thought it was a good opportunity to kind of get definitely a more advanced topic out there and try to alleviate some of the confusion behind it. Because I know when I first started using it, I was like, dude, this is so complicated. Why is this so hard? But I think you guys will like it. And I think there's definitely some speed gains that we can do it. And then also the TD Ameritrade API, I'm still doing that one as well. There was some stuff though I had to kind of fix with that when I was writing it, and whatever. But it's coming along nicely. I'm very happy with the output. And then trying to think what else. Oh, the SEC stuff. Yeah, we got a lot of the SEC stuff. You're gonna like that. So yeah, I think that's pretty much it. So again, if you have any questions, feel free to put them down below. Other than that, we'll see you in the next video.